All right, I'm ready to go. I'm full of information. I'm full of chat.
Bursting with chat. You've got a big, you've got a big chat pimple that needs lancing.
I have chat inside my face that is gonna burst up out of my face with big teeth, and then it's gonna twist your head off with chat.
I can't wait to get eaten by chat.
Great.
Well, Ben Nichols, welcome to Re-Animates.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I am excited, and presumably the audience will be excited as well, because we are covering a film that they will probably actually know this time. one of Jeffrey's more famous films. So today we're doing the brilliant, gooey, disgusting, amazing From Beyond, 1986.
Don't forget sexy.
Extremely sexy, like so horny you could feel the horniness radiating off the screen.
I do want to clarify that. This might be the unsexiest horny movie ever made.
Well, it depends what you find sexy, Ben.
This is very true.
Yeah, I mean, some people are very turned on by people covered in goo.
Also, sucking out eyeballs.
Love sucking out eyeballs. I personally have a huge, and maybe I'm showing too much of myself here. I'm personally very turned on by asparagus looking things coming out of people's heads. Sue me.
It's a little phallic, but in my little social circles, like we've sort of got like a collective kink, and that kink is definitely sucking someone's eyeball out of their face and then sort of like spitting that out and sucking a lot of blood through their eyeball hole. God, it's not for everyone, but to each in their own,
I'm not going to yuck your yum, okay?
Thank you. I appreciate it. No kink shaming on this podcast.
So, From Beyond, famously directed by Stuart Gordon, our mate Stuart Gordon from Re-Animator fame, based on a H.P. Lovecraft story. The screenplay was written by Dennis Paoli, classic Paoli-Gordon double team. Did you say that you read the original story? Because it's only it's absurdly short.
It is a voluminous 9 pages long. I've read it before. I didn't remember it, and I read it at 3 a.m. again last night. There's not a lot to say about it. The original story is it originates with it has an unnamed narrator. They visit a man called Crawford Tillinghast, who is going mad in an attic with a resonator, trying to develop another sense. He has a lot of servants that are not there anymore, who are presumably sacrificed to the giant spindly fish demons that fly through the air, and he gets kind of all Gollum-like and weird and can't describe exactly what the creatures look like in Lovecraftian fashion. Everything is unspeakable, undescribable, and the narrator is just like, well, I guess that guy's fucked. The end. So it's not his finest work. From what I understand, it was like written in 1920s, so like the early years of Lovecraft writing, and it wasn't released like another 10 years. So it was one of those ones where he's like, shit, I need some money. What's at the bottom of my drawer? That'll do. It went out, and Stuart Gordon and Brian Usner must have been just being like, all right, what's next? We did Re-Animator. What can we mine next? What can we be loose with? That'll do.
Yeah, Stuart Gordon loves Lovecraft. He talks on the Blu-ray, because I watched this movie twice. I watched it, and then I watched it with audio commentary, which is very useful. The audio commentary is fun because it's basically Stuart Gordon, Brian Usner, Jeffrey Combs, and Barbara Crampton all just chatting, and it's very fun. But he talks on the Blu-ray interview section about how From Beyond was going to be part of a series of films that he was going to do with Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton, sort of like Roger Corman's Poe cycle. He wanted to just continually sort of work with the same people, putting them into new and interesting roles. I believe that Jeffrey Combs and Barbara were also supposed to be in Dagon in 2001, which would have been great.
And from what I understand, this was like a sort of a two for one as well. They went overseas and shot From Beyond and Dolls at the same time, basically.
Yes, yeah. So they shot From Beyond and Dolls on the same set in Italy, and yeah, so Dolls was released in '87.
Yeah, great, smart.
It is smart, yeah. More bang for your buck, or slime for your coin. Anyway.
I'm so sorry. Speaking of slime, I was reading a couple of like reviews from this in the 80s, and there was a place called the Sun Sentinel that opened with, "This is one of the moistest movies you will ever see."
In so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like a huge amount of the same team from Re-Animator. So you've got Jeff and Barbara, you've got Brian Usner producing, you've got the same director of photography, Mac Olberg, Richard Band on music again, Lee Percy on editing again, same casting director, Anton Barneo, and John Carl Beakler heading up makeup and effects.
And honestly, you can tell as well. Like, for me, all the movies that a lot of the people that were involved in this made in the many, many, many years after it, I don't think any of them have ever quite reached me quite as much as like the 1-2 punch of Re-Animator and From Beyond. For those two movies to be in 2 years, I have these strong memories of like, you know, when you go through like going through the teenage phase and like trawling all of the VHS section, and both the covers for both Re-Animator and especially From Beyond were so striking. From Beyond, the VHS in Australia at the very least, being the image of Pretorius with half his face sort of like SFXing away, and actually getting those things and realizing what you see the credits and everything, being like, oh, this is the same crew, this is the same people, it's all that. I think it was one of the first times as sort of like a young teenager realizing that the same teams that move from movie to movie and being like, what else the hell did they do? And then it turns out that they did a lot of other stuff, but nothing ever really quite reached the amazing heights of From Beyond and Re-Animator.
Yeah, and I think I like the fact that this came out a year after Re-Animator. And in terms of Jeffrey Combs's and Barbara Crampton's characters, it's very much like they're very much like polar opposites now. So in Re-Animator, Barbara Crampton's character, very much just the girlfriend. She doesn't really have much to do. Very much a victim. Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West, very much driving the plot. Very domineering character. You know, some people could argue a little bit of a villain, but just very much the most dominant character in the film. Whereas in this, it's completely opposite, where Jeffrey Combs plays Crawford Tillinghast, very much the victim of possibly his own hubris, but also this devilish machine. And Barbara Crampton as Catherine is like, you know, she's in charge. She's this like psychiatrist, which we'll talk about. She has a sexual awakening, which is fun. I mean, if you've seen a single image from the film, you'd know that she does. and she ends up being the heroine. She saves the day. So it's nice to see their character, like them doing things that are completely different to what they did in Re-Animator.
Absolutely.
Well, let's get into it. We open on Jeff. As I said, he's playing Crawford Tillinghast. He's got a lovely cozy jumper. He is very much a soft boy in this movie. He baby. He's doing very important work on a number of giant computers. They take up the whole room. It kind of looks like what they thought the year 2000 would look like in 1955. We soon meet the second major star of the film, the Resonator, a very big machine that when powered on causes headaches, wind, and eels.
And a lot of horniness.
Lot of horniness. Yeah, the horniness and the headaches are a bit, one for one. It sort of looks like, what were those machines? They used to sell them all the time here in like crappy gift stores. You know those balls where you touch them and there's the electricity on the inside? I don't know what they're called.
Well, I grew up in Canberra, so it reminds me of the fabled electricity machine from Questacon. You go to the Science and Technology Information Center, and you get to watch this giant machine that looked exactly like the Resonator, and it would just do sick lightning everywhere. But it didn't have perfect pink and blue and red lighting on it all the time, so not as good as the Resonator.
Did it make you really horny when you touched it, though?
Yeah, it really did. It's still there. Highly recommend going to Questacon. Try not to get too horny there.
I'm going to go and touch it, see some eels. Well, something I heard... and I'd like to investigate more about this, but I was watching some Q&As with Barbara Crampton about this movie, and something she said was that she says about Jeff that he doesn't think of this role as one of his favorites because he didn't feel in control on the set. Interesting. Yeah, I'd be very interested to know what issues he was having with the character and how he felt about it, because he talks a bit about his process on the audio commentary. If you're a fan of the film, I highly recommend getting it on Blu-ray, not only because it's got a lot of extras related to the making of and the effects and all that stuff and interviews, but the transfer is just beautiful. Like, if you really like the look of the film, then getting it on Blu-ray is very useful. But yeah, on the audio commentary, he doesn't talk much about that. He obviously talks about the challenge of filming in Italy because pretty much everybody on the set didn't speak English.
Oh, wow.
And Italians obviously film movies very differently. Apparently, Italians very famously have very noisy sets, so that might have been a bit frustrating. But yeah, it's something I'd like to look into more because it doesn't come off on the screen. He seems to be just fucking nailing this character.
Yeah, like I would put it up there with one of the sort of like Jeffrey Combs performances that really hits home with me. Obviously, it's not as flamboyant and as large as life as something like Herbert West, but he's still hitting a lot of those like perfect Jeffrey Combs notes that like there's one scene in particular when he's in the asylum, right? In one of the earlier scenes in the asylum, and the camera's sort of going close up to him, and he's really close to the camera, and he's whispering and saying things, and it's just like it was screaming at me like that really operatic performance that he does that was 100% what he was doing in The Frighteners. And like even the way it was filmed, you can tell that like Peter Jackson must have like watched that scene a bunch of times. He's like, I'm working with Jeffrey Combs exactly how the camera's working with him in that particular scene, because that's when he's larger than life and he's big and he's saying things like a cartoon character. Honestly, I think that's the best Jeffrey Combs.
Loves a close up. Loves a close up. Does Jeff?
Oh, it's so good. And also, just personally, like that is definitely, whilst I love Re-Animator so much, like Agent Dammers in The Frighteners, that is my love letter for Jeffrey Combs. That performance is an absolute all-timer for me. There's so many lines he has in that movie that just kill me every single solitary time. Him screaming like my body is a roadmap of pain.
Oh, absolutely. It's an absolute all-timer, and I've mentioned it on the podcast, but it was the first thing I ever saw Jeffrey Combs in, back when I was 12 or 13 when I first saw The Frighteners, and his performance stayed with me for many, many years after that, and it's why I eventually went on to go and watch Re-Animator, and the journey just went on from there. But yeah, he's, as is the point of this podcast, he's amazing.
One great parallel between Re-Animator and From Beyond, I think, is that both of them have really killer prologues. And honestly, they should put more prologues in movies. Prologues are great. The one in this one, before the credits hit, there is 8 minutes. 8 minutes before you see the title of the movie. I love that. It's running itself!
The Resonator causes eels to appear in the air. And these are going to be a recurring feature. And initially he's sort of mesmerized by them, but then one bites his face, so he turns off the machine. The interesting thing about the visual effects of the eels is that they literally just shot a tank at an aquarium and kind of superimposed the eels with, this sort of purple and pink lighting. So that's why they look so sort of fluid, because they shot them swimming in water.
It's a great effect. It works perfectly. It's like such a classic 80s effect as well, like similar to like, in Poltergeist with those sort of like the wavy sort of like ghost skeletons and everything, where everything was just in water and they just superimposed it. Perfect. They should bring that back. Get rid of CGI, just float everything in a tank and chuck it over the top.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, the one thing I've learned doing this podcast is the very noticeable and vast difference between practical effects and CGI. Not that it's something I didn't notice, but the difference that practical effects makes is astounding. I mean, bad practical effects can look still fine, but bad CGI looks atrocious.
CGI can't ooze. It just can't ooze. You can't cover CGI in grease. It just doesn't have the same effect.
Yeah, you can't feel it in your bones. It's also the fact that in this whole opening sequence of him fucking around with the machine and getting attacked, he also hasn't said anything. It says a lot about his sort of physical acting, that he's been doing this whole scene, wordlessly. It's quite nice. It's quite meditative. He goes to see his partner in work, but who's to say in what else? Edward Pretorius, Ted Sorrell in his lovely silky robe. Ted Sorrell's interesting because he worked reasonably steadily between like 73 and 96, and then just dropped off the map and then died in 2010. I'm not really sure why he didn't sort of go on to do other interesting things, because he's terrifying in this. I could definitely see him going and doing a lot more like high profile horror movies, but who knows, maybe he didn't enjoy it. So when Pretorius goes to see the machine in action, he's all agog. He's moaning, the computer's going crazy, he wants to see more. It seems to be making his brain come. And a fun moment again on the audio commentary is when Pretorius says something's coming, Jeff on the commentary says, "No, just breathing hard."
There are some scenes in this where like the amount of words in a couple of sentences are so on the nose. There's one scene in the institution where it has the words organ, came, it ate him, like
It's a sexy, horny film.
ish.
That's why it's so gooey.
Too gooey, if you ask me.
No such thing.
No such thing.
A neighbor's dog ends up on the property of the Resonator house, and when the neighbor goes into the house to try to find the dog, I don't know if you noticed this, but the house has a "Don't tread on me" flag. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Why?
It's something they found, it's just a regular Italy thing, I guess.
Yeah, like the only thing that Stuart Gordon says on the commentary regarding the flag is that they were trying to put as much phallic imagery in the movie as possible.
You don't say.
It's like, yeah, I got that, Stuart, but why that flag? Was it the only thing you could find with a snake on it? That has connotations, that flag. So Crawford's trying to escape the house. He axes the door, scares the shit out of the neighbor. They both run screaming out. The cops nab Crawford because the neighbor had called them earlier. And the neighbor finds her nice little dog gnawing on Pretorius's body, and his head is gone. Cue credits.
Amazing opening. Really, really good. It needed that one little last line, like the start of Re-Animator, like, I gave him life, and then smashing into something, but a twisted little head with no head on it and a dog licking it up that's pretty good.
Also, fun fact, the actress's name that plays the neighbor is Bunny Summers, and the dog's name in the film is Bunny.
No way.
Oh, and she's in Re-Animator as well. She's the Swiss doctor who says, "You killed him."
No, I gave him life. Sorry, I gotta stop doing it. 2 bunnies for the price of 1 is pretty good though.
Well, we meet Carolyn Purdy Gordon, who is director Stuart Gordon's wife, and a great actress in her own right, obviously, playing Dr. Block. And we also meet lovely, fabulous Barbara Crampton, playing Catherine McMichaels. She's a psychiatrist. She's there to examine Crawford's sanity. She, of course, mentions that Crawford went to Miskatonic, where most Combs characters live. I like to picture them all living in the same dorm room. Crawford Tillinghast on one bunk, Herbert West on another bunk, just sharing a room.
If I were doing fan casting in the early 90s, I would 100% be casting Barbara Crampton in From Beyond as Harleen Quinzel. Very, very strong Harleen Quinzel energy, the way she looks there.
Crawford mentions that the point of the resonator is to, quote, stimulate the pineal gland with resonant vibrations, and that Pretorius believed it was a dormant secondary organ, a sixth sense. Science. Anyone who's seen the movie or even seen a trailer will know this sound, but I gotta put it in because it's so good and so weird.
Crawford, what did you see?
It ate him. Bit off his head. Like a gingerbread man.
Catherine orders a CAT scan, and as Crawford's going into the machine, she's so tender with him. Like, she's like stroking his hair, and he's like, no machines. And she's like, it'll be okay. It's really sweet. It's one of the only genuinely kind of sweet and nice moments in the film. And in the scan, they see an enlarged pineal gland. And so Catherine's like, I want to do further tests. So they just give her Crawford. And they head off to Pretorius's house, the Resonator house, with Sergeant Buford Brownlee / Bubba, played by Ken Foree from 1978's Dawn of the Dead. He's also in the very underrated 1988 horror movie Death Spa, which, if you haven't seen it, is really dumb and fun. I also didn't know that between 96 and 2000, he was a regular on Kenan and Kel.
Oh.
Beautiful leather jacket in this movie too. Oh, you could just eat it off him. Something else I noticed, and I don't think this is in the original story, so I'm not sure either way, but the house is on 666 Benevolent Street.
That is definitely not in the original story.
That just seems on the nose. What a weird thing to put in the script. It'd be the equivalent of like if you were making like a sex comedy, it'd be the equivalent of being like, I live on 69 Penis Street.
This movie could have also been set on 69 Penis Street.
Look, to be honest, would have made more sense.
69 Penial Street.
Crawford's upset to be back at the house, and they soon find Pretorius's sex room, which features a lot of fun-looking equipment. You've got your porno TV set up. You got chains. You've got what looks like a bench press, but I have to assume is a sex thing.
I think this is the worst sex dungeon I've ever seen.
Well, it's not a dungeon.
Sorry, sex room
Rumpus
on the
room.
second floor that I've ever seen. It looks like someone's workout room that they don't hang out in, like that they've never used. You've just got like some some barbells in the corner, some weights in the middle, maybe a treadmill, and it's been used 3 times. But you'll use it in the new year, definitely.
It's also interesting that because they turn the TV on, and what automatically plays is a video of Pretorius doing BDSM sex stuff with a woman. So presumably he was doing a lot of fucking in that room. But there's a bed in there that's like a single bed. If you're going to have a sex room, have a big, comfortable bed.
Yeah, exactly. I can definitely smell that room. I don't like the smell.
What does it smell like?
It smells like... When I was a teenager, I played Leisure Suit Larry 7, Love for Sale, and it came with a scratch and sniff, which would be various things like condoms or like a strawberry flavored lubricant that you could smell while you're playing the game. That's what that room smells like.
Oh.
Very, very, very cheap sex dungeon.
Catherine and Bubba find the Resonator. They also find Crawford trying to destroy the machine, but Bubba's hungry, so they have to take a break from saving Crawford's sanity and good name to make some food.
They did find one more thing up there. One very, very important thing, which fucking killed me. There is a chalk outline on the floor with no head on it.
Well, how are you meant to know where the body with no head was?
It's such a thick chalk outline too, and just this tiny little bump where no head is. They've actually, where the little twist was on the head, they've done a careful little trace around it, just to make sure the investigators know exactly where, I don't know, Pretorius's head fell off.
I also like that that's the only thing remaining from the crime scene. Like, they left it
one
there.
thing.
They knew people were coming back, and they're like, no, we'll leave the chalk outline there so people can remember there was a body there. I actually don't even know, like, it's such a common trope in films and movies, but is that even a real thing? Do they do, like, outlines, like chalk outlines and stuff?
Like, I guess. It just seems very weird to have it be so permanent. Like, that was like some heavy-duty gaff tape that they put on the ground for that one. And just like, well, the crime scene's done. It looks good on the floor. Might as well just leave it there. Whoever the new homeowners are, what they want is a reminder that there was a headless body found on the floor here, so... And you know what? Leave the Resonator as well. You know, call it like, the next homeowners, Resonator will go well. It really holds the room together, you know?
Apparently the food the Bubba is making is beef stew and dumplings.
Because to me, it looked like giant potato and gravy, and that's all I wanted to eat after watching the movie.
It did, yeah. It looked potatoey, and I was like, oh, yum. I want big balls of potato.
Yeah. Just give me one giant snowball of potato slathered in gravy. Nay, 2 giant snowballs of potato slathered in gravy. Please and thank you.
I'm genuinely surprised that KFC hasn't done that. That sounds like it would go well with any other thing on the KFC menu.
Is your potato mash too not shaped like a ball? Try sphere potato with gravy.
They could release them for Christmas and call them Christmas snowballs.
That is a perfect idea. You're going to make a lot of money.
And the ad is like children throwing the snowballs, but they land in each other's mouths.
Yeah, like the full thing,
Yay!
except they don't fit in the mouths, except because it's so tasty, they manage to get them inside their mouths. This is amazing. Let's pitch it to KFC tomorrow.
We're going to be millionaires. Crawford fixes the Resonator so they can recreate the experiment. And when the machine is on, everyone starts getting like headachy, brain achy, but also really horny. And Crawford and Catherine start like giving each other eyes. And it's like, But also like Bubba is definitely the third wheel.
Which is ridiculous because he's the sexiest person there.
It
All right.
depends on your
equal sexiest person there. You know what? All 3 of them are the sexiest person there.
All 3 of them are very sexy. I will say that Jeffrey Combs is incredibly attractive in this movie, but only for the first 20-30 minutes.
Oh, the last 30 minutes isn't your thing? And I thought you were a fan of Jeffrey Combs.
You gotta be in a certain mood for Jeffrey Combs in the last 30 minutes of this movie. I'm not saying it's unattractive. I'm saying I've got to be in the right headspace for him to suck the blood out of my eyes.
Yeah, you do.
They start seeing eels and jellyfish. I'll take some screen caps of the eels and the jellyfish because they look great.
Almost cute. Like very cute. Little jellyfish when it's got like its little eyes and its little claws and it's trying to eat into you, you know? It's like a tiny little dog trying to bite you. It's not going to hurt you. It's just a tiny little jellyfish, you know?
Yeah. It's kind of like, when a puppy is like biting you, but you're like, oh, you've just got little puppy teeth. You're not dangerous.
Just keep gnawing on that little jellyfish.
The sea creatures are absolutely cock-blocking them, though. They soon hear Pretorius's voice, and he appears from the shadows. Ted Sorrell has incredibly hairy shoulders. like, I don't know if that's something they put on him. I don't think they would have, but he's an incredibly hairy man. He did not die, he says. He simply passed beyond, and now he is gooey and arse naked. He says this, which is, take it how you will.
Is it really you, Edward? Touch me, if it pleases you, if it helps you understand.
It doesn't please me. Crawford touches him and he's like spongy, like polymer clay. And Pretorius peels his face off and his face is all snakes. I hate when that happens, when your face is all snakes. And it splits open and he sort of leaps out of his own skin. I mean, it looks great. The practical effects in this movie are so good. I cannot tell you, like, what a good job everyone in the effects team did on this. It's awesome.
John Carl Beakler only died a couple of years ago. So many good. He did lots of Full Moon stuff by the looks of it. He directed Ghoulies 3, Ghoulies Go to College.
Far and away the best Ghoulies movie, I'll say.
By a long shot. I only watched it. We showed it as part of our movie club recently, and I was actually shook at how much better it was than I thought it was. But also weird because like the Australian VHS cover of it makes it look like Porky's 2, but it's not that in any way, shape, or form. It's actually not that. It is way less horny than From Beyond. Let's say that much.
It makes it look like a filthy sex comedy, but with ghoulies instead of college teens.
But it's just not. It's actually just a really fun movie.
I like the moment when Crawford turns off the machine and says, "That will be quite enough of that," which I think is from Mary Poppins.
Okay.
And here's just a little clip of Catherine explaining a lot of the brain stuff and Bubba's reaction.
If there's a statistical correlation between schizophrenia and an enlarged pineal, why, they may be seeing or feeling what we saw. Their minds may be influenced by those creatures.
Well, how about the hard-on I got? Is there a statistical correlation for that, too?
Catherine wants to run the experiment again. She's got a real boner for the Resonator now. Crawford and Bubba are like, no way. But while the guys are asleep, she goes upstairs to play with the Resonator. Bad idea, Catherine. Crawford tries to stop her and she kisses him and they're making out for heaps. And then Pretorius comes back. Again. He is such a mess. There's no good way to describe him now. He calls himself, quote, more than human. But what he actually is a pile of limbs and goo and skin. He is a man casserole. It's
beautiful. The titular image from the front of the poster in VHS.
Oh yeah, far and away the most famous image from the film is this particular bit of his transformation. But now he's got Catherine. Crawford runs down into the basement to try to turn off the circuit breakers, turn off the machine. Bubba runs out of the room to tackle him. Bubba is in a Speedo. It is a bold look.
It is unfucking believable. It rules so hard to do an action sequence in red underwear, tight red briefs, to attack a giant worm, to stab it in nothing but beautiful Tony Abbott-style budgie smugglers.
It's a bold look, but, it was an emergency. What are you going to do? Put on your pajamas and a robe when you've got a giant worm in the basement? No.
I completely agree. You wear what you're wearing, which is tiny little red budgie smugglers.
They don't look comfortable either. They look really tight. You shouldn't sleep in such tight underwear. It's bad for your bits.
I would like to argue, though, that is the sexiest thing in this movie.
It does remind me a little bit too much of Tony Abbott.
Fair enough.
Which is one of the least sexiest things you can think of.
Very true. Unless
you're, trying not to come, then it's a good idea to think about Tony Abbott. Sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry I mentioned it.
This is a really horny movie. It's going to bring out a lot of bad stuff in us at the moment. It's hard to skirt around it. I mean, I am coming at it from McMichael's perspective, which is all sexuality is sins of the flesh. We have a very Catholic mentality towards these disgusting sex dungeons and perverse actions of Mr. Pretorius, of Dr. Pretorius.
Dr. Pretorius and his various little schemes. I'll have no part of it. Unless...
I'll have no part of this softcore 50 Shades of Grey bullshit.
Well, apparently, Stuart Gordon was saying that there was going to be a scene that was cut out where Pretorius nailed a woman's tongue to like a board.
Oh. Did that happen in 50 Shades of Grey?
I haven't read it,
so no. Let's say yes.
Why not? I mean, look, there's room for all types. But yeah, I'm genuinely surprised that didn't make it in because, you know, there's a lot of gory stuff in this. But I think the difference is that one of the other things they talk about is they thought that they would get around the rating system by replacing basically any part of a movie that you would have blood in, apart from times that you would actually need blood, with goo. So it's like the goo is just kind of like translucent, or it's pink, or it's green, so it's not bloody. So it's not going to seem as gory as something like Re-Animator, which had a lot of blood and bones and stuff. But it ends up being even worse.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, blood isn't sexy, but dripping disgusting goo over my insane monstrous side body, that is sexy. So, you know, that's not a bad rating. That should be a good rating.
I'm gonna give this an A+ for opening my mind to new experiences.
I think this is how the MPAA works.
There is a nasty scene though where Pretorius is groping Catherine's breasts with his horrible long alien salad fingers. It's pretty nasty.
Yeah, it's got some of that Re-Animator final finale energy, doesn't it?
Yeah, I do. Like, I know that Stuart Gordon, you know, likes Barbara Crampton as a person and as an actress, but this is 2 movies in a row where she's not fully naked in this as she is in Re-Animator, but she is manhandled in both films, and I'm like, come on, man.
He seems to wants to torture her a little bit. I saw an interview with him once where he's sort of like, I like working with the same people because I know I can ask them to do whatever I want. And it's just like, okay, sure.
Well, maybe that's why Bruce Abbott isn't in this. Maybe he was like, no.
We've gone from 5 minutes between a time where it's sort of like, who gives a shit about bodies? My body is nothing. I'm just a mind. Also, oh God, your body. And you're like, okay, sure. It's not consistent, but all right, look, we're going with it.
The whole next sequence is bonkers, though. So Pretorius is in the attic turning into an eel monster, and in the basement, Crawford and Bubba are met by the most phenomenal prop in the movie. It looks like a giant lamprey, or maybe a giant door snake. It is flopping about like mad. Bubba's screaming, attacking it with a knife in his little pants. Crawford's swimming around in the water that's flooded the basement for some reason. I have no idea why the basement's full of water now. They're trying to get to the power to turn it off. Both Catherine and Crawford get their heads fucked with in this point, like quite literally. Pretorius is sucking on Catherine's head with his monster face, and Crawford is getting chomped on by the basement snake. So there's a lot happening, but thankfully Bubba gets the power off. Crawford survives, but he's not happy because he is now completely hairless and very upset.
Okay, so I've got a few questions here. No, I've got one single specific question.
What question could you possibly have?
Did the worm monster suck his hair off?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why. It didn't really leave any marks, like he wasn't cut up. He just lost all of the hair from his body like he had alopecia.
Yeah, like I need to explore this a little bit. Was it like mega radiation in times of the word inside the worm and it just fell off? Did it literally suck the hair off his scalp so that there was nothing there? You'd assume it would be red in that situation. Did his head go into like another dimension inside the worm, and for some reason that dimension doesn't like hair, so it took it away? Or was it just convenient for him to be bald after that?
But it also took off his eyebrows and his chest hair as well. It's weird that he would just come out hairless. I'm not really sure why. But the baldness does help for what eventually happens to Crawford. Because despite everything, Catherine is addicted to the machine. And she wants to stay. Bubba wants to take Crawford away. Catherine starts exploring a lot of the devices in Pretorius' sex room. She's like walking around, and all this time Crawford is asleep in the sex room bed. For some reason, that's the room he's decided to sleep in.
In the nice little single bed that's in front of the very beautiful picture I presume you get from like Sex Dungeon IKEA.
Yeah, generic sexy artwork. Yeah,
it's like just a kinky boots poster, and you're like, okay, sexy, really, really kickstarts the mood in the sex room.
I've always said, don't buy your art from Sex Dungeon IKEA. Support local Sex Dungeon artists. So she decides to try on one of the fun leather outfits that she finds in a closet, and she looks amazing. I mean, she's gorgeous. And the good thing about this, though, is Barbara Crampton says this was one of her favorite scenes to film. So I'm really glad that she had a good time in this movie.
I'm not sure that scene hits me the same way as it does hit you. To me, it reminds me of like someone who's never gotten. It reminds me of Sandra Dee at the end of the Grease being like, "So how about it, stud? I'm a sexy girl here for sexy sex times," and kind of like and doing the Jamie Lee Curtis dance in True Lies. That's what that looks like to me.
In fairness, I mean, the character is meant to be very much discovering this aspect of herself. So she's not going to go full BDSM fuck goddess straight away. Like, she's very much learning how to connect with her body and how to connect with the leather. She says that she really loved wearing the leather. She also says on the audio commentary that she put this scene on at a dinner party with some friends. They asked to see it. They were like, "You were in this movie, that scene is so sexy," and they wanted to watch it, so she sat there and watched it with her friends. Cool. Let's all go to a dinner party at Barbara Crampton's house.
Yep. Let's watch the scene where she touches Jeffrey Combs' asleep member, gives it a little sniff, gets on her way.
Yeah, like that. Like it's like that. The tail end of this scene isn't great because Crawford is very much asleep, and she's sitting on top of him, sort of manhandling him, touching his bits. Bubba does interrupt this, and she starts having an existential crisis about what's happening to me. And then the Resonator turns itself on. They go up to investigate, and they're attacked by bugs, insects,
bees. Let's call them bees, monster bees.
Oh god, not the bees!
Not the bees! Not the bees!
They're actually tiny painted styrofoam balls.
Really?
You know, you wouldn't have thought it, but they look like bugs presumably because they've added the bug sound effects, which help quite a bit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But unfortunately, Bubba is just devoured by these bugs. So
not just devoured, he gets like a cartoon, like Wile E. Coyote has just been dipped in a vat of acid below his head, and the bottom half of his body is now just a skeleton with his normal head up the top.
Yeah, it's kind of like when a cat eats a fish and pulls out a fully formed fish skeleton.
I don't think Bubba deserved that. Poor Bubba.
He was a good guy.
All he did wrong was sensibly tell them to get out of the house and to stop fucking around with the Resonator constantly.
Oh yeah, he was the only sensible person in the house. Pretorius Monster comes back. His pineal gland is hanging out of his head like a horrible little snake. Jeffrey Combs, in the audio commentary and in a lot of interviews and stuff afterwards, he always calls it a dog dick because that is kind of what it looks like, to be honest.
It's his little red rocket. It's his pineal. Pineal red rocket. I'm so sorry. I won't say that again.
It's nasty. It's nasty business. Pretorius is summoning Crawford's pineal gland, and it pops out of his head like a worm out of an apple in a Richard Scarry book. He says, "It's so beautiful," but like the effect that he is seeing out of his pineal gland, it just looks like something out of like Videodrome. Like it's just kind of that negative effect.
It's Predator vision. It's Predator vision, except you just see brains.
Like it's not beautiful. It's different, but again, different standards of beauty in 1986. Catherine does manage to get the machine off, but Crawford is not doing well, so she decides to take him to the hospital. There's a fun scene of Carolyn Purdy Gordon as Dr. Block having fun trying to grab the gland that's popping out of the hole in his head. It's a great effect of this hole in Jeffrey Combs' head and the dog dick pineal gland popping in and out, like teasing her. Like, you can't get me.
You'll never get me.
Oh, can't touch me. That scene also was apparently meant to be a lot longer. I'm kind of glad it is the length it is. Catherine is released into Dr. Block's care, who has had a problem with Catherine this whole movie. She keeps calling her the girl wonder. Dr. Block has also, when she's dealing with Catherine, has just left Crawford in an OR for that whole time. So he easily escapes and just starts wandering around the hospital. He tries to eat some normal human food, can't stomach it, but his gland is telling him to eat other things. Human bits, inevitably. It's like brains, eyes, all that shit. It's pretty gross, but...
No, he just like spitting out the eyes. He's got like a tactic down, you know? Like, if you're going to attack everybody, you got to suck out the eye, spit the eye on the floor, then either suck out the blood or presumably maybe the brains through the eyeball socket. I'm just speculating here. Just speculating, just trying to get into the mind of the throbbing pineal gland, you know?
When Dr. Block sees a bunch of blood coming out from under the door in the pathology lab, she sees Crawford just hoeing into some organs that have been in there, and she just says, "Crawford, please don't eat those." you know, like the way you talk to a dog, you know, who's gotten into the flowers or something.
That's a bad Jeffrey Combs. A bad Jeffrey Combs.
Yeah, she hits him with a newspaper and then rubs his nose in the organs. No, we don't eat hearts. We don't do that.
And he does look very guilty. He's sort of like, yeah, okay. No, sorry. I'll put the brain down.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I just wanted to eat it so bad. He is briefly horrified with himself, but then the gland takes over and he eats Dr. Block's eye out of her head. A fun day on set, no doubt. Stuart Gordon just being like, "Hey, Jeff, suck on my wife's face."
But then there's a little, like, kick to the stomach as well. So he's just like, "Oi, calm down so that I might suck your eyeball out and then drink from your head." Move over, vampires. We got a new way to do this now. Next, old news. Eyeball sockets, this is the way we do it now.
This ain't your daddy's blood drinking. This is how we do it in the go-go 80s. Crawford sees Catherine escape, and he also sees an ambulance pull up, so his thought is like, yum, yum, yum. Crawford attacks the paramedics because he wants to eat their brains, but he stops himself, gets in the ambulance, and tries to follow Catherine because he knows that she's going to the Resonator. Catherine now has a bomb. Dunno how she got a bomb, but it's like an old school bomb, you know, like the dynamite with the little clock in it that you only ever get in cartoons or like 1940s movies. She does want to blow up the Resonator, but Crawford ties her up in the sex room. He wants them to be together in the beyond. His gland is coming out real fierce, getting right in her face, and Catherine bites it off. It's nasty. It's nasty business. I can't imagine how it feels to have your gland bitten off.
It has all the energy of biting a penis off. That's what it looks like. That's what they're insinuating. That's how they present it. It is biting a dick off.
Nasty business. Mm-hmm. Pretorius is back again, though. Here's a fun exchange.
The greatest sensual pleasure there is to know the desires of another mind.
I mean, I don't know about that. Like, there's probably lots of other great sensual pleasures, you know. What about hand stuff in the back of a car in the drive-ins? That's pretty fun too.
How about not getting eaten by bees?
What about getting eaten slowly by bees?
My favorite sensual pleasure is keeping both my eyeballs and not having the blood and brains sucked out through one of the eye sockets.
Oh, you're so boring.
I know, right? I thought we weren't kink-shaming here.
You're so vanilla. You don't even want your eyes sucked out of your head. Crawford does try to fight Pretorius, though, and his many monsters. And there's one, and I'll take a screen cap of it. It looks a lot like Brundlefly. It's really horrible. That's the one that eventually gobbles him up. It's very upsetting because we were really rooting for Crawford. And he does get very brave. He's like, "I'm not running away. I'm going to save the day." And he's like immediately eaten by something. It sucks. It's kind of sad. Catherine has an ingenious plan. She manages to get the eels, the air eels, to chew through her restraints so she can escape. Now this I don't understand. She goes back downstairs to see Crawford's headless body and then runs back upstairs. If she knows that the room is about to blow up and she knows Crawford is dead, why has she gone back up to the room with the resonator in it?
The answer to that is obvious. Because for God knows what fucking reason they need to have Crawford rebirthed through Pretorius's monster body?
Yes, that is integral to the plot, obviously. I mean, you can't not have that scene. And now he has hair as well.
Yep, it makes perfect sense. I'm not questioning a single thing that happens in the rebirthing scene where Crawford has hair again when he climbs finger first out of the mouth of Pretorius's The Thing style monster body.
Yeah, he just sort of comes out of one of Pretorius's various sacs that he now has on his body.
It's a boy.
Mazel tov, it's a Jeffrey. He's fighting Pretorius from the inside. There is so much goo and muck. I cannot stress to you how gooey this film is.
Oh, and then this awesome little effect where, like, so as they're sort of like fighting and like mucking around in the gooey bodies, there's two bodies forming as one. Both their faces just kind of like fall off, and there's just these two little skulls, and the two little skulls start having a little biting contest and biting and nipping and biting each other. That's kind of the finale fight at the end. Two little half-sized skulls nipping at each other.
Great. It's the ultimate fight. They're the ultimate warriors now. None of their flimsy bodies to hold them back.
It's King Kong versus Godzilla, but two tiny little skeleton heads just going...
Yeah, why I order? Yeah. Oh, if I had my body, I'd get you. Catherine does manage to leap out the window of the room before the bomb goes off. Her leg is all fucked up when she gets on the floor, but the resonator is thankfully destroyed. Unfortunately, though, it does seem that Catherine has gone quite mad. She has a nice big insane laugh at the end, and that is what we go out on, is her being driven quite insane by the resonator.
With like 20 neighbors that have suddenly rocked up.
Well, I imagine there was a lot of noise, sex noises and otherwise.
Absolutely.
And that's the end. It's a very short film, I always forget. It's only something, it's just under 90 minutes.
All right, so I have some questions for you.
Please, yes.
We talked about before the beyond, or whatever that is, and I'd like to explore whatever that is a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
If we are breaking down a bunch of points of whatever the beyond is, or whatever this sixth sense is, we have. Makes you not care about having a body. It makes your body meaningless. It makes you extremely horny. It makes you want to suck out eyeballs and eat brains. And it removes your hair. And it also makes you get reborn out of the mouths of monsters.
Sounds about right.
What? Why? 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 What's the lesson here?
I think you'd be better off asking Stuart Gordon and Dennis Paoli these questions, but in their stead, I will attempt to answer them. Being the font of Jeffrey Combs' knowledge that I am,
Great.
I think the best way to describe it would be movie reasons.
Because it looked sick.
Yeah, it looks good. They love goo. It's fucking weird as hell. Yeah, the idea of the beyond is very vague. Even the way Pretorius talks about it, it is talked about as a sort of a different plane of existence. I don't know. Maybe it's kind of like what will become when we reach the singularity, or maybe when we all become heads in jars.
Yeah, I mean, this movie treats both this sixth sense or this other weird dimension and sort of area just as alien and as attractive as like regular kinky sexuality. I'm not sure what the connotation is between those two. Like, it's the movie's kind of kink shaming in a little bit, in a weird way. Like, it kind of attributes even like really, really basic 50 Shades of Grey sort of like sex dungeon sort of stuff as the same as, you know, scientists gone mad, gone too far.
Well, yeah, that's like his sexual proclivities. Pretorius's sexual proclivities are seen as part of his madness and his depravity, even though we have to assume, because it isn't said otherwise, but we have to assume that these are consensual meetings.
Yeah.
The way Crawford talks about it as if he's Pretorius is like killing these women. You know, he says, you know, I used to hear them screaming, but again, the movie is just saying he used to have really wild sex. So it's like, is the movie just being like, oh, having sex is as bad as being a murderer? Or is it like, you know, was he actively like a violent guy? So we don't quite know which side he ends up on there. But he does become a very violent, mad guy by the end of the film.
I suppose it wouldn't be the first horror movie to insinuate that sex is just as bad as taking drugs is just as bad as murder.
Yes, welcome to the entirety of the 80s.
I still really love this movie, though. Like, I love it to high holy bits. I think I mentioned it before, but it was one of those movies where when you scan the VHSs at the video store and you grab one, you're like, that cover looks phenomenal. I hope this movie lives up to whatever that is. That was the goal of like hunting down those horror movies on the weekend. It was picking up the one and getting the delivery that the cover and the pictures on the back promised. And I think this movie genuinely does that. Like, the gore in it is genuinely disgusting. It's genuinely great. I think it's up there with some of the coolest effects of the 80s, along with stuff like, like up there with the, maybe obviously not as good as like the effects in The Thing, but definitely as like hard hitting as those ones.
I mean, for one, I think that the gore in this is actually, I think, substantially more palatable because most of it isn't blood, because it is mostly just goo and things that are very obviously effects. Like, they're all fantastical effects, like the giant worm and the eels and stuff. So they're not things that seem real. And also the fact that it's so very pretty in some shots. I mean, Mac Ohlberg, the director of photography, did such a good job in framing it and lighting. Like, all the rich color palette of this is so strong and striking. Like, all the purples and pinks are just beautiful.
The lighting is amazing, and honestly, it was one of the, like, for how much like stock we put into blue pink lighting being representative of sort of like, modern VHS aesthetics. There wasn't actually a lot of 80s movies that relied on that exact type of lighting. So for this one to have that very specific look that is actually kind of like more of a modern VHS relatable look, I think is kind of awesome. One of the things that really strikes me about this as well is just sort of like reading about the background and how much money they made the movie for, especially this in conjunction with Re-Animator. And a lot of the movies that Stuart Gordon and Brian Usner did go on to do, and obviously, sort of the things that they did or didn't do with the band family. It strikes me how much like that Re-Animator and From Beyond really should be, and are in their production level, B movies. But I don't think these two movies come off as B movies that much. I actually think they're filmed so well, and the production teams on them did such an amazing job that they don't really come off as that sort of like lower grade, straight to video mentality. And obviously these movies did go to the cinemas and they were sort of like lower build ones. But I would say that like a lot of the ones that sort of happened later in the 80s and across the 90s, I don't think they ever quite reached the cinematic heights that those two movies did. I feel like those two really, to me, are the best representation of that Stuart Gordon team.
The unfortunate thing is that Re-Animator was made for a very small amount of money, something like just under $1 million, made a huge amount of money. So then Stuart Gordon was obviously given a huge amount of money, something like $4 million to do From Beyond. And that's why they filmed it in Italy, because I think he says that to make the film they wanted to make, it would have cost something ridiculous like $15 million if they made it in America. So that's why they were able to make it with the small amount of money they had. But it actually just, it made quite a pittance. It made something like $1.5 million at the box office, which is probably testament to how weird it is. Like,
it got really, really mixed reviews. Really mixed reviews at the time, sort of going back and reading them, because like pretty much every single review that was out there, and it was sort of like, it was a nice little insight into Re-Animator at the time as well, was pretty much every single review that I was reading for it gave the movie, 2.5 or 3 stars out of 5. And they said, look, it's fun. Horror movie people are going to love it, but it's not as good as the already cult classic Re-Animator. And I didn't quite realize that Re-Animator was considered a cult classic, a year after its release. And that really, I mean, it deserves it. But that's kind of great that Re-Animator hit really hard. Did you know that they released a sequel? Full Moon released a sequel to From Beyond this year. It's called The Resonator Miskatonic U, and it is like a Full Moon Entertainment, like hyper low budget thing, where Herbert West is a character and Crawford Tillinghast is a character, and the very bad trailer had all the like flying worms and everything again.
I have heard about it. I would be very reticent to watch it.
Yeah, me too.
Here's the synopsis then. Set in the fictional college campus Miskatonic University in Arkham, Massachusetts, where all sorts of fantastic and unworldly events have been known to unfold in Lovecraft lore, the Resonator, Miskatonic U, follows 6 gifted students as they navigate life after one of them, Crawford Tillinghast, builds a machine known as the Resonator. The machine allows one to experience multiple dimensions while navigating the unsavory beasts that dwell within them. But things get complicated when Tillinghast realizes that the prototype of his creation has not only released murderous and deadly creatures into his world, but has also affected his own reality.
Oh no, they're gonna get horny again. They're gonna start sucking out eyeballs.
Yay! Justice for Crawford Tillinghast.
They'll start the Lovecraft shared universe. 20 movies, 6 seasons of TV shows.
But yeah, that's From Beyond. It's gooey as hell. Although, again, I don't understand why the reviews were so hard against it. Because it is a little bit more obtuse than probably some of the other movies that were coming out. Like, it's a little bit denser with its mythology and stuff like that. Like, it's, Re-Animator, by comparison, is fairly easy to understand. It's a magical serum that brings people back from the dead. Pretty standard horror stuff. This one, it does have a lot of very vague sounding science. It's not quite clear what it's going for. So you have to suspend a little bit more disbelief.
Oh, the reviews that I was reading definitely all mentioned that it was a sexy movie with sexy sex in it. And we're sort of skirting around the romantic notions of the undertones of the movie. It's
not even any more sexy or romantically or gratuitously, however you want to frame it, than any other movie at the time, I don't think. I mean, there isn't even any sex scenes, really. No. There's a lot of sex alluded to. And, there's the sort of the very brief cut of Pretorius's tape. But
I would say that the movie, like, definitely frames all of that as the sins of the flesh.
Well, of course. And the characters are justifiably punished for their sins.
Absolutely, and as they should be. Disgusting.
Disgusting behavior. How dare people rub their genitals all over each other like sick freaks. Like monkeys in a zoo.
It will be nice. After this podcast, I am going to go sit in the corner on my knees and whip myself for a while, so... I think I mentioned it on to you earlier, but I was blown away reading about this movie to learn that Stuart Gordon and Brian Usner wrote the original treatment for Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous.
To think that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids could have been a horror movie then.
Stuart Gordon and Brian Usner's treatment for Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was pitched as a movie called Teeny Weenies. And eventually got changed to the name Grounded, and then, I don't know how Hollywood works, eventually it became The Big Backyard, and then eventually Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Why not?
The one they went with is the best title of those other titles, but only because the other ones are all garbage.
Absolutely.
I love the idea of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids being a horror movie. Like, imagine Rick Moranis is like a mad scientist who has developed a shrinking ray, and he's like, I'm deliberately going to shrink my children. And then, the idea of them, going through the backyard and them being in like real danger and like actually having to escape from, really upsetting tiny monsters. And maybe one of them dies.
Imagine the alternate universe with a Stuart Gordon directed Herbert West, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Honey, I Shrunk Dan.
And then all the tiny people in the backyard are fighting all the Bride of Re-Animator creatures that he made, like the little hand with like the eyeball and stuff. And it's running through. It's this giant hand with an eyeball attached to it that these kids are like, his own children are trying to like escape in the backyard. And this is just entertainment for Herbert West because he's got to see how this plays out, You got to see how it plays out. Otherwise, what's the point of the experiment?
He has shrunk all of those horrible monsters he made in the sequel, and he's thrown them into the ring with his poor children. And he's like, go, my pretties, go.
And let's get working on that technology immediately, because that actually sounds like a really good movie.
Herbert West is the king of fucking around and finding out. Just out of curiosity, what's the first Jeffrey Combs movie you can remember seeing?
I probably saw one that he was in that I didn't realize, but the first one that I remember was definitely Re-Animator.
How old were you?
Pretty young. So I started watching. My parents were very lovely and let me get Evil Dead at the ripe age of 12, and sort of just started plowing through the horror section from there. So Re-Animator was actually really, really, really early on because there was a lot of websites in sort of like the late 90s that already had sort of like, what are the best horror movies of all time? And Re-Animator was in every single solitary list there. So that was one of the really early ones that we got. So that was a lot of fun. It would have been Re-Animator and The Frighteners very, very close in line. And I distinctly remember being like, that's the same guy, and I love that guy. He's the best.
Yes, it's that was, I mean, very similar to my journey as well. Hey, that's that guy. I love that guy. All right, Ben Nichols, anything to plug?
If you're ever in Brisbane, you should definitely come visit Netherworld. It is an arcade bar in Fortitude Valley full of arcade pinball games, classic arcade games, pinball machines, consoles, good food, beers. And we host a little thing through that venue called the 2-Bit Movie Club. Me and my good friend Ben, who you might know from Twitter as Thomas Violence, host a variety of trash and not so trash movies, both in the venue and often at cinemas. So yeah, if you're in Brisbane or ever visit Brisbane, please come and join us. I'm on Twitter as Ben Jungles, or you can check out Netherworld Arcade on Instagram and Facebook at Netherworld Arcade.
Sounds great. As usual, you can find this podcast on Twitter and Instagram at ReanimatesPod, Facebook, YouTube, and Tumblr at ReanimatesPodcast, and it's at all of your usual podcast apps, wherever you get podcasts. Unless you get podcasts from like an old guy selling them at the market, because I don't think you can get podcasts like that. I think he's stooging you. I think he's maybe giving you a bit of a bum deal there.
Yeah, I get my podcast on VCD, so
I am very surprised that there are not people who are putting out podcasts on vinyl. Oh no, actually, I'm wrong. The boys from Two in the Think Tank podcast, Alistair Trombe Birchall and Andy Matthews, who I've had on this podcast, they made a vinyl record of one of their episodes for a fan.
That's incredibly nerdy. I love it.
Maybe one day Re-Animates podcast will be playing on someone's beautiful old record player.
Sounds like science gone too far to me.
Not far enough, and not sexy or gooey enough.
Sexy sex for sexy people.
And mashed potatoes.